Hi, greetings and welcome to another Pan African Community News broadcast. We're live. You're here with me, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu, and the wonderful Sister Oleander. Hopefully, you can hear us both. Sister Oleander, are you there with us?
Yeah. Greetings, everybody. Hope everyone's doing well.
Yes, excellent. And as usual, you can please catch us live on, I keep forgetting, you'd think I'll remember that now, Facebook and YouTube. So if you can hear us okay, please use the chat function on there and just give us a heads up. Sister Oleander will be monitoring the chats, and that way we can have an idea that we're going out live to you and with no technical glitches. As usual, it's a jam-packed show, so I'm going to whiz through the news that's occurred over the last 2 weeks since we last broadcast. So thank you for joining us. And as ever, we always tend to start with our libation section where we remember. So the first libation, or the first remembrance we're going to talk about is the passing of one of our great jazz saxophonists, which is Wayne Shorter. Now, for those of you who don't know, Wayne Shorter was an amazing musician. His career, or in his career, we seem to have a. Let me try and do that. Okay. In his career, his musicality spanned different genres from what they call fusion, from bop as well as jazz. He passed away in a hospital in Los Angeles, aged 89, but he was central to the evolution of the jazz scene. He worked with the amazing Jazz Messengers, which was led by the drummer Art Blakey. And he was known for what's called the hard bop style, which was, which he, developed with the amazing Miles Davis quintet. I think it's the second iteration of the Miles Davis quintet. And he also did some work for Incredible something some work with the group, Weather Report. But I know Wayne Shorter's work from his Footprints era, which I still listen to this very day. And so his passing, as they say in our community, is tragic loss. But at the age of 89, I'm pretty sure the ancestors will be pleased with him as he joins them. The next libation is again to another classic musician, one who's not as well known as Elder Wayne. This is the saxophonist Carlos Garnett, and he passed away in Panama at the age of 84. So I think it was that fairly had a good innings, I think is the comment. But he was known for many works. Well, behind the scenes, I say, because he's not as famous as Wayne, but he was very influential back in the day. And his work on tracks like Gentle Enlightenment and The Black Love, which are deeply spiritual sets, kind of like were amazing standouts. So again, it seems like the last few days, because these are quite recent passings, we've lost some amazing musicians and artistry from this world, but they leave a legacy behind, which hopefully will never ever die. I'll move on to the next slide, and this is this is quite I won't say belated, because we did mention the passing of our beloved sister Nicole Andrews. She passed away last year, March the 21st. She had been fighting breast cancer. She was a founder of the Organization of Black Unity and the driving force behind getting the Marcus Garvey Center renovated. Now, Sister Dr. Nicole was an activist. She was a mother. She was a scholar. She was dedicated to the upliftment of the African community, especially in Birmingham. Did some amazing work, and to honor her memory, the community there are going to have an opening of the Nicole Andrews Community Library in the Marcus Garvey Center. So that should be an amazing space to share ideas and to continue the legacy of her work. So we just want to remember her. I think Sister Oleander wants to say something, but she's muted, I think.
Sorry, it came up too soon. Sorry about the gremlins. Well, I was just going to say that our friend Mr. IC3 Black sends his greetings,
Greetings.
and says also, yes, okay, and I think that means that he can hear us well. So that's
Wonderful. Well, thank you for letting us know. It's good to know that we're out there and that we have you listening with us. Now, that's the last one of the We Remembers for this week. And then just as a reminder to everyone as well, if there's someone in your family that's recently passed away, or someone that you know, or someone that you want to attribute, you're always welcome to send the details and a photograph to us. And we're more than happy to share them. It's something I've always had a big problem with. Even when we was running the NSAPO, we used to do this. We don't have a space in this country to reflect on those who've passed from our community. And I think it's a spiritual deficit. There's something wrong with that. Back home we would have gazettes or radio stations, and we would talk about people who we honoured and passed over to the ancestral realm. But the fact that we can't do this, it's always bugged me. So this is your platform, this is your station, this is your program. So please feel free to join in if you need to. Now I'm going to move on to the next section, which is UK policing matters. These, as you know, invariably are never very good. And the next story is one from last year, and we're receiving more information on this because this is the tale of Ricardo dos Santos, and he was the young 28-year-old who was stopped and pulled over by the police in August last year. Now, the police said that they thought he was on his phone, and that's why they stopped him and they flagged him down, and they got quite annoyed because he didn't stop immediately. Now, he wasn't stopping straight immediately because he wanted to stop where he felt it was safe to do so, but he did stop. And then they went to grab him. And what we now know from the investigation that's taking place is that actually the only reason they let go of him was because they spotted that his phone was recording their actions. So, there is an investigation going on by the IOPC. I know it's supposed to be independent, but, we'll see what happens from that. But it is very interesting to note that, we are now starting to see the power of recording police encounters, and actually how just public scrutiny, or the potential of public scrutiny, is actually now starting to modify the behaviors of some of those corrupt officers who would be more inclined to reach to violence to satisfy a bruised ego than actually to do their job with a level of professionalism, which means that they keep a cool head and do not resort to physical manhandling or abuse of those that they regard as suspects, even if they're innocent of any crimes. The next story is it's just a recap. This is we're now 6 months in since the murder of Chris Kaba. His family clearly are still grieving. I think Helen and Prosper. They are saying they're unable to mourn his loss. I think, if I remember correctly, the police showed him some footage, and yet they're still saying quite clearly they want justice. So we know that even though no one's telling us what the footage shows, we know that there are still questions to be answered. So the Independent Office of Police Conduct, I just spoke about the IOPC, who are investigating the death of Chris Kaba. They're saying that they expect to deliver his report within the next 3 months. I think in a couple of months ago, we spoke about one of the investigators who's left the IOPC because she felt that when she raised certain issues about this investigation, that her lines of investigation were ignored and buried. And so she doesn't have trust. And this is an officer of the IOPC. But we have to wait. We still got 3 months to see what it comes up with. But let's be clear here. The family's patience is wearing pretty thin. They just want to know the truth, and they're being really vocal about it, that they need to know what happened and how. The fact that they've been waiting for 6 months now is torturous for them, and they have made it clear they can't wait for another 6 months. I did see a clip on one of the news channels with a small gathering outside near the spot where Chris lost his life, where he transitioned. Our thoughts are with them, and it's really important as a community that we keep supporting them. And even though different topics coming in off the media radar, that we return to this one, and we apply the right level of scrutiny to ensure there's justice for the Kaba family. You're watching the Pan-African Community News Network. It's the 12th. Is it the 12th? I think it's the 12th. It's the 12th of March 2023. Just going through the news. We just went through the police section. The next is where we just go through some general issues from a Pan-African perspective from the UK. So the first story, which is one we touched upon, and we're just going to develop a bit further, is that of the British slaver family, the Jalens, who have actually now stayed true to their word after finding out that they were deeply implicated and involved in the enslavement of African people. Their family enslaved over 1,000 African people and received compensation from the British government for that. So like as a bonus, as sick as it may sound. Well, they've actually, now having had a family conference, I think they met on Zoom, decided that they were going to make a public apology, and they have. They made a public apology in Grenada, and they're going to make £100,000 in reparation, a payment. So remember, reparations, and this is the problem with the kind of like backward thinking that takes place in the UK on the topic of reparations. Reparations isn't the same thing as compensation. So the apology is part of the reparation. The £100,000 is a part of the compensation, which is an element of reparation. So they're going to make reparation in this, in this part of it, which is a component of £100,000, and donate the money to the University of West Indies. Now, I think the whole initiative has been led by Laura Trevelyan, who's a New York-based BBC correspondent. It seems that she has a pension pot on its way, so as soon as she has that and receives it, she'll make the payment. And they seem true to their words, and I think they set an amazing example, for many others who have profited from the Ma'afa, from the inhumane, brutal crimes against people of African heritage, and still live off the proceeds of those crimes. Well, this is one family that's doing their best to actually address that. And I would actually go far and say that actually the apology is a really meaningful part of this, and I commend them for saying this. And they didn't just stop with just saying I'm sorry. They didn't say it's a statement of regret. They went further, and they kind of like placing it in its correct context. So it's nice to see a family saying they're going to deal with this issue, they're going to address it, and actually staying true to their words. Yeah, so that's what's taking place in Grenada. The next story is one from what's about a businessman named Robert James Kalibala, and he's in the interesting position where he's having to fight against the company or the corporation Ocado. Now, this is from what I gather, it's one of these food delivery businesses. I'm not sure how large it is. It seems quite large, but I'm not sure the scale of it. Well, what's happened in this case was that he's now being threatened with legal action because they're saying that he's infringed their copyright. Now, this is a bit silly because what he's done is that he's founded a food import business called Orgacado. So it's organic avocado. So Orgacado, that's it. Orgacado, that's how you pronounce it. Now, he did this in February 2018, so it's not something he's just done 5 minutes ago. And in Orgacado, what he does is he specializes in growing and importing organic, large, soft-skin avocados and other tropical fruits and vegetables, which come directly from Africa into the UK. So this is not, a delivery business. It's not in the same sector as Ocado. However, Ocado is trying to say that he's, trading on their name or that kind of doodah. And even though Dr. Kalibala has actually successfully registered his business with Companies House, so it is a formal company, and he is he does work with agricultural bodies like the Soil Association. He hasn't got a copyright patent on his name or logo, and so that's why Ocado is now trying to come after him. So either I don't know if they're going to try and get money from him or just to shut him down. But this is quite ridiculous when you have an independent business person just trying to make a living, and you have a large company that's in a completely different sector trying to encourage him that. But this is the world that we live in. So I thought it'd be good for you to know. This one's here, and I just realised perhaps I should have put this in a good news story.
Sorry, Toyin, before you go to the next one, I just wanted to welcome Mr. The Fall 3. He says it's his first time here. He had a deeply rough Sunday. Wish it was under better circumstances, but glad to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you with us, and sorry that you're having rough circumstances. Hoping that we can bring some light to your weekend by the end of this program.
Absolutely.
So give thanks and thank you for letting us know that you're watching as well. I'll carry on with this story, and this is the one of the Black Lives Matter UK organisation. Now, as much as the government has tried to demonise the Black Lives Matter movement, both here in the UK and in the US, we have to commend the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK, or the organisation, because they have come under the most horrendous attack. And when I say horrendous, I'm talking about from every actor, from every level, from the Prime Minister to the Home Secretary, the continuously Equalities Officer, continuously under attack, and yet they're still doing amazing things to support African heritage communities. Now, they have just completed another round of funding, and in that round of funding, they've given 350,000 to other organisations, Pan-African organisations, campaign groups all around the country that are doing work to uplift, support, heal our community. Now, we say £350,000. That's it's over £250,000, and they are a small community group. Now, you might remember that they received a lot of donations during the summer of 2020, following the widespread protests that accompanied the murder of George Floyd in America. And so they've stayed true to their word, and they continue to find organisations that are doing good work and keep putting the money in. I think there's been a comment from, is it Boateng? I think it was Paul Boateng, who said that actually what they are doing is probably one of the largest investment programs in anti-racist and African-led community organisations ever, in decades in the UK. And this is happening by Black Lives Matter, not by the government, not by Sadiq Khan, not by the Labour Party, not by any other. This is actually community giving back to the community to help it solve itself, to help it solve its problems. So, I don't have the list of organisations that receive funding. I know two of them, which has really brought a smile to my face. But one of them is the amazing Decolonising the Archives project. So congratulations and well done. And the second one is the Hackney Account Programme. So they've also received funding. Again, two organisations that are based in my neck of the woods who are doing some amazing work. One in the arts, one in police scrutiny, and it's just fantastic to know that this is still going on. So if you are looking for a charitable cause to donate to and you're unsure, don't forget that Black Lives Matter UK still exists. And every time you donate to them, then what happens at the end of the year, they'll go through all the different activities and organisations that are on the ground nationally, and then give some funding where possible. I think they're also funding the United Friends and Family campaign as well. So they're keeping that topic on the agenda, and that's what we need. A lot of our organisations fold because we don't have sustainable resources, and we have here an organisation that's taken that 1.2 million and using it judiciously and very strategically to ensure that we can keep growing and we can keep working in a self-determining way to deal with the issues that afflict us. So that's definitely a good news one, but I thought we'll share it here anyway. Just as a reminder, why we need organisations doing that. There was a story that came out, so I'll say a story. It's a story following a report that really reveals that missing African children are less likely to be found by the police. Now, this report's been put together by a charity called Missing People, and it suggests that, well, it's probably not news to you that a lower proportion of missing incidents related to children of African heritage were resolved by a person being found by the police than incidents related to other communities. So it's rare. When I say it's not, I shouldn't say it's rare. We don't have as much a high success rate when our children go missing. And this is a tragedy that is still taking place. In fact, the data also showed that cases involving African children were likely to be missing for over 48 hours and over 7 days. So often when these cases happen, children are found within a week, not in the case of children of African heritage. So this is one of the issues. This data was pulled together by freedom of information requests, which were sent to local authorities and police. And I hate sharing these statistics. I hate sharing these kind of things, but we kind of need to know this. There's still this penchant to undervalue and to under investigate these kind of issues, to take them as seriously as we would like them because we are African. The next story is just an update.
Sorry, Toyin. I just wanted to say on the previous story, I wonder if this is all part of the same adulterification of our children.
Yes.
I'm wondering if they're, as far as the police are concerned, our children are older, or they seem older than they actually are, and they just look at them physically and just want to just see them as adults and not as innocent children. It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, that is totally possible. I mean, we don't know. We know it hints towards Afrophobia, and we know where there's Afrophobia that there's adultification. But it'd be nice to get it's good use of freedom of information request to get the data from the police, but it'd also be nice to get the reason for the police. I still believe that I need to take a year off and do participant observation with the police. To get to the heart of this, I don't think we can get this from any more reports. I think someone has to go inside and watch and observe and ask questions and do that for not just a couple of weeks, but for at least a year. And it's not something that I'd relish, but I'm saying that this is where anthropology becomes very useful. And we won't get to the heart of this without that kind of research taking place. But yes, I suspect you're right. There is an element of adultification, looking at the children and not seeing them as vulnerable. It's the one thing where we see our babies, other people see them as grown adults. They can't mirror the physicality, the differences in physicality between the stereotypes of what they perceive a child to be and the reality of what a child is across the world. But I will move on. Just talking about the story, like I said, of Sister Space. This is an update on this ridiculous scenario. I don't need to go over the details. Most of you will probably remember that Sister Space was attacked on social media quite viciously after our sister Ngozi Fulani attended an event at Buckingham Palace and was, her space was physically violated. One of the aides, Susan Hussey, moved her locks out of the way. And then there's this recording of this, or reporting of this encounter, trying to find out what her heritage was, which was very, very intrusive and drew upon racist stereotypes from the account that we were given. The latest update on this is that our sister has now temporarily stepped down. She's resigned as chief executive of Sister Space. Now, this is a sad state of affairs, and I'm glad to hear that it is only temporary. I suspect it's because every time the organization tries to do something, they're just viciously attacked by social media trolls. We don't know where it's going to go. Sister Ngozi has done a TV interview. I think she's argued on is it Great Northern Britain that she believes that Buckingham Palace haven't done enough to support her over this and to protect her over this. But I don't want to go on about this story. I just thought I'd just give you an update on this, and we hope that Sister Space is able to get back to the business of protecting women from domestic violence and abuse. Okay, you are watching the Pan-African Community News Network, 12th of March, Sunday. I think we are half hour into the program. I'm going to go into the UK politics session. You're here with me, myself, brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu, and the wonderful sister Oleander. And yes, remember you can chat on the doodaddy thing. Sister Oleander's monitoring that, and we'll share your comments. And you can ask questions as well. Please feel free to ask questions or share news that you would like to do so. You know, we're on both Facebook and YouTube at the same time. And if you kind of like just want to watch back, or you had to go away and support, don't worry. I think they record it, so you can watch it another day afterwards. But it's nice having you here live. So I'm going to go to the next story, and the next story is this interesting one about James Cleverly. Now he's actually going to visit Sierra Leone. It says on International Women's Day. International Women's Day was a few days ago. That's the 8th of March. I should have updated that. My apologies. I don't know what else to say about this, because he said he's going to visit some schools and I think medical spaces to see how British funding has made an impact in Sierra Leone. He's quite proud of being the first minister. He's a foreign minister, the foreign minister of Sierra Leonean heritage in the British government. I can't particularly say that it has helped anyone of African heritage at all. But hey, there you are. It's part of a multi-pronged attack to say how Britain's developmental aid is actually helping in Africa. And I'm sure there'll be some lovely photographs that will be sent back and broadcast all over the Conservative website to show us that British aid is actually helping African people while they're still pursuing this racist back to Rwanda policy. This next story probably links to the one about the Trevelyan case. And this is where the Labour MP, Clive Lewis, has actually called on the British government to enter negotiations with African Caribbean leaders and ask them to make reparations. In fact, no, I say make reparations because I should be quite specific. He's asking them to pay reparations for British role in slavery. I say the difference between pay and make because, as I said, pay reparations is a very it's like a primary school approach to reparations. It's kind of like not really well formed. Make reparations is the correct term, and I'm it's good that they're having a discussion. I can't I was quite surprised to hear that the Labour Party under this Keir Starmer clown actually would allow one of the MPs to actually talk about this. Probably the reason why it's not all over the TVs, it's just been done and hidden. But at least I'm sharing it now. We know he had this. It's a good step forward. I don't know if the UK's most leading reparationist was involved. That's Sister Esther Housey Stanford. Hopefully she was involved in that discussion, or was it comes across as just purely optics. But yeah, that's what took place. There was a parliamentary debate on promoting financial security in the Caribbean. Clive Lewis made this point that it couldn't just be dismissed as an obsession of a so-called small woke extremists. And yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like I said, I'm quite puzzled, to be honest with you, that this situation of the Labour Party actually cares about it. So it's nice to see that the MP has actually spoken on it. I haven't heard a debate. I haven't read about a debate. I don't know who was at the debate, but at least it took place. And like I said, let's hope that our Sister Esther was involved. The next story, and Sister Oleander spoke about adulterification. And this is something that many of us in the community are keeping an eye on, this particular topic, adulterification and Afrophobia in schools. This next story is really about the calls from MPs, or calls to MPs, asking for them to record racist incidents that are taking place in school. There's been some research by the YMCA, and this was highlighted at a parliamentary debate, and it just said, look, you've seen the spate of recent racist incidents that have been taking place in several schools, and we need to do something about this. We need to record them. Surprise, surprise, MPs from across the House, not just the Tories, or across the House, has said that actually, no, we don't need to record racist incidents. We've got enough, ways for them to get advice on racism, etc. I'm surprised somebody didn't say do unconscious bias training and stuff like that. And so this is part of the problem, right? So these incidents are taking place. Our children are being, abused or assaulted on Afrophobic grounds, but we're not collecting the data, which is the reason why, actually, the group that some of you will know that I'm involved with, which is Hackney Act, is taking a stance on this, and we will be launching an audit to find and record this information so that we can act on it as a community. So watch this space. Hopefully I'll come back to you in a couple of months or so with that, and you'll see that actually, if they won't record the racist incidents, then we will be calling out for you, those of you in the community, to find sympathetic head teachers, staff, parents, to actually help audit this and give that information so that we hold it centrally. And that way it can't be manipulated to pretend that Afrophobia doesn't exist in schools, that adultification is done and it's been solved in schools.
Toyin, sorry, Mr. IC3 Black says, big up Clive Lewis on reparations.
That's good. I have no idea whether it was a good debate or not. I'm hoping that it was a good one, but it's good that he raised it if he did.
Yeah. Also, he says, we, Reparation Nation, are presenting a plan.
Oh, I hope so. I mean, for the longest while, the reparations agenda has been controlled or has been led really from the movement in the US. But the history of reparations and of Ma'afa, or African enslavement and colonialism in the UK and the US, are quite distinct. So even though it's a shared campaign and we should support each other, and we do, let's be clear, we do support each other, it has slightly different ways of finding restitution, finding justice, different arts, different needs. And so it's important that those of us in the UK who are aware of this issue get involved and don't let it just be buried or be led down a path that is not quite applicable to our particular issues. The Trevelyan family case came about much because the amazing research by UCL, and I'm not being biased here, but Kirsty and my God, my brain's gone, and Kate Donington, and my mind's gone. I've worked with them for so long, I've completely forgotten. Richard Draper, they did this amazing research. You can find it on the UCL website. What they did is they hunted down the details and the records of those who had been paid blood money, the compensation from the government for releasing enslaved African people. And so that's how we can now track down people who have been involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we all see ourselves as part of the same family, and that no matter where we're from, whether it's over on the other side of the pond or not, as Pan-Africanists, we should be working together and supporting each other, because if one of us actually does something really good and is recognized by their peers, then we over here should also big them up. And I think it's just right to do that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we've had a really great kind of like a example of powerful leadership from the Bayesian Premier, Mia Motley. I mean, she has just put her money where her mouth is and isn't holding back. And many people often try to dismiss the call for reparations when it comes from the Caribbean island, and they the islands, they try to think that, well, there's not many people on all the islands, it's a small amount of people that we can kind of like bury the concerns and treat it like it's not irrelevant. But no, like you just said, we are one global family, and the concerns that happens, whether it's on whether it's Barbados or whether it's Hackney, or it's Tulsa, all these areas are linked, to us. And
Yeah.
the same thing, like obviously with colonialism, people don't assume. It's one of the problems that we have, is people don't recognize that colonialism is another form of enslavement, and it was just a progression of transatlantic enslavement. So I don't, as you know, I use the term RFI. I don't separate the processes. That would be a trick that we mustn't fall for. But I'll move on with the story. Good, thanks. So sticking with the theme of children having awful outcomes in British schools, this is the story of Jalens, who was aged 11. And I mean, you probably won't be surprised if I told you that on his first day at school, he was placed in isolation because he had locks. And it just caused him an incredible amount of distress. Now, I will say that Robert Clack, who is the head teacher, has actually apologized for placing him in this exclusionary situation. But he has since then, our young son, Jalens, has been teased and tormented because of his hairstyle. And he's just decided that he's going to cut off his locks and, do it for charity, because he just can't cope with it. It's just causing too much stress. Now, the school is saying that the parents haven't complained, though his mother hasn't complained about, bullying, etc. But actually, from what it looks like, is that he just hasn't named the children that are bullying him. Irrespective of all this, we don't want to go back to a situation where schools are blaming the victims for not providing a safe space for them. So I just want to big up our young son. He shouldn't have to endure this. It's ridiculous that we're still having stories like this and having to share with you. Yeah, he has launched his GoFundMe page, which so far has raised almost £600, and he's trying to get £1,000 to give it to a charity. The charity is called A Future Youth Zone, and I think they help with mental health issues for young children, because that's what he was suffering from. So it's a really noble cause. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave that there. Now, we're going to go into a section we call UK Health. And the first story is about controversial treatment for a condition called vitiligo. Now, many of you who have seen the film that I made some time ago, Beauty Is, will be aware of what vitiligo is. If not, you may have been familiar with the claims of the late Michael Jackson, who claimed he had vitiligo. But it is a real condition that affects African people in many different ways. We see it, or it becomes prominent in the media when it's on the face of people. But vitiligo isn't just a facial condition. It can happen anywhere in the body. So we have many people who have vitiligo. We're just unaware of it. It can lead to really stressful situations. People can be, their self-esteem can be damaged by bullying, by insensitive comments. And so it's with that context that there's a new treatment called ruxolitinib. I can't pronounce it. What's it? Ruxolitinib. Ruxolitinib. You'd think I'd spell these things phonetically to make it easier. Now, this is a new cream that is said to be able to return the skin to its natural color and get rid of the whitened patches. And it sounds really good, and I suppose it is good in one way, but it does come with potentially serious side effects. So this is always those kind of things. Now, the side effects in this case is that it can affect the body's immune system, and I think that is a serious side effects, because what that then does is leave users of the treatment more susceptible to infections such as coughs and colds. And I think we had to be mindful of those approaches. But of course, those people who live with it and this condition and have been going through hell, this might be a good option for them if they feel that they really want to change it. I mean, its success rates are quite high. In a sense, it's like, about half of those who've used it twice a day experienced a significant improvement, and about 1 in 6 had almost complete repigmentation within 3 months. Now, the catch with this is that the list cost of a tube of this treatment is £2,000. And with the NHS, these are kind of the questions they ask, whether it's worth making this thing available. So there's all those kind of issues. I wish I did have this clip of there was a sister on BBC London this week who had vitiligo, and she was talking about not this particular story, but a related issue of vitiligo. And I think it was a role model or a supportive network or project that supports people with vitiligo. And she was quite confident, saying that actually she wouldn't take any kind of treatment because she's learned to live with vitiligo, and she's proud of her skin, she's proud of who she is and how she is. But she understands and doesn't criticize anyone who would feel that there's let's take something like this, or let's kind of like find another way to mask it. So anyway, that's that story. I don't know if there's any questions on that one, but I'll leave that there. The next story to do with health is starting to become a familiar theme. We spoke last week about the nurse who won her employment tribunal after she had been bullied and alienated and treated in a discriminatory practice based on her African heritage, because she was doing kind of like a race equality work, or equality, inclusion, diversity work, I should say. This is another story, unfortunately, about a nurse, Adelaide Kwema, who actually won £25,000 from the NHS in compensation after she proved that she was told that she should bleach her skin white so patients would be nice to her. This didn't happen in some quaint little village in the UK where there's no African people around. This was actually a racial harassment claim against the Central and North West London NHS Foundation Trust. So I could go into details, but do I need to? I mean, all I need to just tell you is that they literally said you need to get a pool of bleach to bleach your skin so you can come back tomorrow white and the patients will be nice to you. I spoke about the thing with our young son and how there's this tendency to blame the victim. This is what this is again. So we're having employers that are saying, let's tolerate the racism from patients and actually put the onus on you as an African to change your appearance, to change your natural beauty, to change everything that's about you, to appease toxic behaviors.
It's not, but the thing is, sorry, Toyin, interrupt. The thing is, it's not just about trying to force her into a position where she makes herself more acceptable. She's suggesting that she literally poisons herself, and that could literally lead to death. And I think, wow, the fact that this person felt that she could say that to our sister, it just shows you the contempt at which she looked at her and looks at us. It's damn disgusting. I don't know whether, I mean, aside from her winning this amount of money, what happened to this person who told her that? I'm assuming she was in management.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, the way that these systems work, they'll probably go on some training course and then kind of be well behaved for 6 months and then go back to repeating the same crime again. Unfortunately, that's what tends to happen. I mean, I've cut out some other stuff. I mean, she was also subjected to loud racist chanting. I mean, she's been in a hostile space at work, and this is within the NHS. This is not to critique the NHS itself. It's just to critique the culture of racism, of Afrophobia that exists within the NHS. I'll move on to the next story, which unfortunately isn't much better. It's really one about when we are trying to get to the bottom of these cases and when we're trying to find out what causes them and why there are problems such as this. You see that those famous words, well, we're going to launch an inquiry take place. Well, we know there's going to be an inquiry into COVID disparities. I think I spoke about this in the last program. But there's been a doubling down on this decision that, but this is by the inquiry lawyers saying that it's not necessary or proportionate to look at racism as a specific component for this inquiry. And the families and the bereaved and people are just saying, look, if lessons are to be learned as you continuously report, then it's crucial, it's critical, it's fundamental that you look at the issue of racism. And our brother, you can see in the image, Charlie Williams from the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice campaign, says that there was evidence that you were significantly more likely to die from COVID if you were from a minority ethnic community. And this is clear cut. Why would you not look into racism to find out what caused that? The government, of course, has had pushed back. This is when Boris Alexander de Pifeld Johnson was Prime Minister, with its Creed report, that travesty of dead trees and ink, put together by Tony Sewell, which claims that there is no more racism present or institutional racism present in the UK. But now we have another inquiry looking into COVID, which actually could do so with a bit more authority and a bit more credibility. It shot itself in the foot because it's not going to look at racism. This is where we are. Okay, we're going to go into that section where I know next to nothing, which is the one we call UK sport. And so I know next to nothing. I mean, you know, I'm not the most sports informed scholar activist on this planet, but I am engaged with the politics around sports. And so I'm going to start off with a story about the Premier League. And this one's quite interesting because there was a brother by the name of Kay Badu who joined the Premier League in 2022, that's last year, on a consultancy basis. And his job was to look into issues of racism, internal racism, and report back to senior staff. And he found out that actually there was incidents of internal racism in the Premier League. And he did report it back to senior staff members. Now, of course, people are denying this and saying it doesn't exist, and kind of like, you know, maybe trying to allude that he's over exaggerating these kind of things. And so what's now happening is that there's going to be an independent barrister assigned to investigate his claims. So, you know, keep our eye on there, because you know, we know what happens with these kind of things. You say racism and people just kind of roll their eyes and pretend that we are over exaggerating situations. I saw something in that comic, the Daily Fell. That's a bit. I don't even like invoking it on. You know, I saw online about this case where he put a tweet out saying, "This is our brother Kay Badu asking whether it was, what was the words? Whether it was racist to listen to senior colleagues make comments about we're only going to go to the clean parts of Africa," or something like this. It's along these lines, and he was just asking this question. And I'm assuming that what I took from his comments in that piece was that the kind of racism that goes on at higher levels isn't the kind of thing where you hear people talking about Enid Blyton's gollywogs or using the N-word and all that kind of stuff. It's this kind of subtle, insidious type of racism which leads to exclusionary practices of people who are doing good work, or the demotion or lack of promotion of people on the basis of their heritage, etc. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this this investigation at the Premier League, especially in line of some of the issues that are going on. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. The next story is one of the footballer from Swansea City. His name is Michael Obafemi, and he has told a court of the amount of intense amount of stress that he and his family has suffered after he was the target of online racial abuse. Now, you know, like I said, I don't know much about it. All I know is that he was transferred to a Swansea football team from Burnley or something like this. So I think they do these loan players. So you move from one football team to another for a certain period of time. And there was a character, his name was Josh Phillips, who just sent some really abusive tweets. And Phillips has actually admitted now that his tweets were grossly offensive, obscene, and menacing as well. So we'll see what happens. This court case is still ongoing. And, he actually says that this is what Michael Obafemi said. He says that the racial abuse I've received is totally unacceptable. It doesn't matter what I do as a job. I'm a human being and I don't deserve this sort of behavior. So again, this is another investigation that we need to keep our eyes on. It's good, it's in the courts, but I have no idea where it's going to end up. And so I said I would go into another story that's linked to this. It's like a football week today. And the biggest story in the mainstream media today is that of Gary Lineker, really. And, I'm not sure if you're aware of the backdrop of this. And if you aren't, I can summarize it for you now, right now. We spoke about this new immigration policy that the British government had moved forward in. They've actually pushed forward and created a bill. It hasn't been passed yet. This is called the Illegal Immigration Bill because, and it is illegal, which is ironic. It has a preamble explaining that it's not compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. So if it does pass Parliament, they will be putting past, or they'll be enacting a law that is actually in contravention of international law. But that doesn't seem to bother this government. And what happened was that Gary Lineker, another footballer, or former footballer, I should say, who's a host now of Match of the Day, he put a tweet out in his personal capacity, just saying that the language that was used, by the government, around this particular issue, and particularly he's referring to Suella Braverman. He doesn't name her, but that's who everyone assumes he's talking about because she's been the most toxic of. Worse, I can't believe she's actually worse than Priti Patel, but she has been. So that it was reminiscent of the language that was used in Germany in the 1930s. It was a very simple tweet, very accurate tweet, very precise with its language. It didn't refer to Nazis or Jews, or it did none of that. But of course, the Tory party weaponized it. They invoked debates that were reminiscent of claiming that Gary Lineker was anti-Semitic. They said that what he said was beyond the pale. He was invoking Nazism, blah blah blah. I think around 20 or 30 of them wrote to the BBC saying that you need to sanction him, you need to counsel him, you need to do something. So the BBC came up to Gary Lineker and said, look, you need to apologise for this. And Lineker said, no, I'm not going to apologise for this. And so they forced him off. They forced him off air. And they thought that'd be the end of it. But fortunately, and this is actually one of those moments where you can say, well, maybe I won't go too far and say you're proud to be British, but you can say that there is some hope in the heartlands of the UK, because there's a lot of people who are actually against Gary Lineker. So let's place this in context. The nation has pushed back. The public has, by and large, stood behind Gary Lineker. A lot of it's because if you see his tweet, which is on his personal account, he didn't say this during Match of the Day, he said it in his personal capacity, is accurate. The demonization of innocent human beings who will be criminalized if this law passes by an act of parliament which is illegal, which contravenes, not just morally, but legally compromises international law, is accurate. So it's a really bizarre scenario. But so people supported him, and then Ian Wright, who's his co-host, actually immediately said that if he's not going to be on the show, I'm not going to be on the show. And that level of allyship and solidarity, we need to see more of. He said that, and then Alan Shearer said the same thing. He came up and said, I'm not going to do the show. And then you started having a whole lot of presenters across the BBC, the radio stations, podcasts, just saying, and even footballers saying that we're not going to do interviews with the BBC. And so the BBC had to seriously scale back its TV programs. And we'll see what happens. They're still trying to resolve this. Lineker's saying that he's not going to apologise. I mean, there is one issue with this that really pees me off, and that's the issue that because we're now focusing on Lineker, who's actually said the right thing, we're not actually looking at the legislation anymore. And more important than that, we're not talking about the human beings who will be the victims of this legislation if it goes through. And that's where our focus should be. I didn't get the chance to read, I just saw the headline of something about Priti Patel, and this whole idea that undocumented children could also be sent back unaccompanied if they reach the UK. I don't know if, I mean, this is children. This government is saying that it would deport children by themselves thousands of miles away to keep Britain white. I mean, that's what it's saying. It's pandering to racism. And the Labour Party, oh my gosh. So I think you had Yvette Cooper, you had some of these others, I can't remember their names now, they just do my head in. You had them, when Lineker said his statement, Emily Thornberry, all going on the media saying, no, what Gary said was wrong. He shouldn't have said that. It was beyond the power, blah, 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 blah. Because they're petrified of being accused of being anti-Semitic. So they just parroted this line. The moment the public said, we're behind Gary, they're now coming around, and their leader, the Starmer boy, has come out and saying, well, the BBC should, bring Gary back, blah, 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 as if he was supporting him. They're just showing that they just blow with the wind. Whatever the way the people say is the way they go. We cannot trust them. We cannot trust any of them. This is, so anyway, I'll leave that there. But I just wanted to share that. That's
so we've got a few comments, Toyin. From D, it's all planned in my opinion. I don't trust anyone.
Is that about the Gary Lineker story?
And and then he says regarding Gary.
Just on that, I think that's completely right. I think the Conservative know that this law is going to just blow up because it breaks human rights. They know it's going to be a fight about it. It's going to get all media attention, and no one's going to focus on their incompetence. It just makes them sound tough on immigration, so they pander to racists. And what's happened is that we're falling into it. It's a masterstroke. There was some young man on Question Time, and Question Time is also an awful program by the BBC now. But he actually said something similar about we're not thinking about the cost of living, we're not thinking about PPE bribery, and we're not thinking about all the awful things that they've got away with and are getting away with while we're talking about these kind of issues. And it's correct. Sorry.
And although Mr. The Fall 3 says, if it is planned, what would the benefit be?
Yeah, it's politics. You see, what's happened right now is that the Tory party, the government, has little chance. Well, they had little chance of winning the next election. I actually think they have a good chance of winning the next election now. Just simply because the opposition is useless. It's just completely useless. And so they have a good chance, but they're frightened because all the so-called polls, which is where they ask 1,000 people every now and then, what do they think of the state of play, has said that Labour's, they would vote for Labour. And there's going to be some midterm elections coming up, and this is normally when people punish the government. So what they have to gain from this is by pandering to the racists within the UK, to those who what they call the Red Wall Brigade, those who are anti-migrant, anti-human beings, and showing that they're tough. And it's working. I actually think it's working. I think that those people who are actually decent would see this for what it is and would be outraged. And those people, who like the Conservative Party, who voted for Brexit, they'll be like, oh, maybe the Tories are coming back to how they used to be. Maybe, I don't like this brown guy, this Sunak character, but, he's got a little bit of that Boris in him with this law. Yeah, I mean, they did shoot themselves in the foot, because on the same day as all this kicked off, Sunak was in France with Macron, announcing that they're going to build a detention centre and spend £423 million. That's £500 million on detaining migrants in France. I think it's over 5 years. can't remember how many years over. That's £500 million. They can't find the money to cut our bills. They can't find the money to kind of like make sure that children have school dinners, but they can find £500 million to stop like tens of thousands of people on an island of 70 million from coming into the UK. That's what they have to do.
I don't know. It's just
It's
ridiculous.
optics. It is optics. But we have to be careful. I mean, we can't say nothing. That's the trick. You know, we can't, you know, you can't let someone like Lineker kind of like face this on his own when, you know, I mean, and it's good he's not. All the footballers are coming out supporting, but we mustn't lose sight that they're coming from migrants. And if anyone thinks that, well, you know, there's an island that's too many immigrants anyway, blah, 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 blah. Because I've heard enough people, African people, during the Brexit debate, push back and say, well, the island's full, mate. I've heard them. I've heard people from our community support that. What they need to remember is that once they get bored of talking about migrants, they start looking at us. They start looking at all of us who are from minority ethnic communities in this nation, and start attacking us. And, you know, and I say start attacking us. They've never stopped attacking us. They ramp up the attack on us. So, you know, it's very important not to let anything slide. Just because you may think that these are refugees from Syria or they're refugees from Afghanistan, you might think that, you know, they've got nothing to do with us. Well, they have everything to do with us. They're humans. And they're trying to find a safety and sanctuary in a world which is where the troubles have probably been caused by Britain or America.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's a big story.
Okay, so I'm going to move you on because we've got one more comment. Oh, hold on. No, there's two. Sorry. D says, agree with you, Toyin. We need to focus on the important issue of this topic. And Mr. the 4-3 says, hypocrisy is part of the package with these people. Yes, true.
Yeah, hypocrisy is the hypocrisy of democracy. That's, you know, they're the same. It's and it's Machiavellian tactics.
Yeah.
But I
just
will
letting
move
you know,
on.
it's 6 minutes past 8, just as your time.
Okay, I'll speed through the next section then as well. Thank you, Sister Oleander, and we'll move on. But just to close by saying, you know, really big up Ian Wright for us standing up by his friend and being a good ally on this. It's really important that these kind of things happen, because what's happening in the UK is it's an attack on human rights. And if Britain comes out of the Human Rights Convention and then starts enacting the British Bill of Rights, our children, their children, and their children's children, you know, will face some serious issues. There was a story that I wanted to share, we just didn't have the time, about now how those of us with any kind of heritage that extends outside the UK, outside Europe, now our national status is not secure. You know, I spoke about the Shamima Begum case, so I won't rehearse it here, but our status is not sure. Any of us can actually now lose our nationality by some of the precedents being set by this government. But I will move on. And the next part of this program is international news or world news. There's only a couple of stories, and I'll just share them with you now. The first is just so you know what's relevant and how what we've just been speaking about is relevant. In Tunisia, there's now a move by President Kais Saied, who's saying that migration is a plot to change Tunisia's demographic profile, and he's now blaming people, as he's labeling and blaming this on what he calls traitors who are working for foreign countries. And so what he's doing now, and what's been happening, is detaining migrants that have come from across Africa into Tunisia, and dozens have been detained. So this is what Britain is doing internationally. It's poisoning the discussion around migration. It's poisoning the well around refugees. And directly on the motherland, what we're now seeing is that in North Africa, in places like Tunisia, African migrants on their own soil are actually being detained, imprisoned, and deported. Now, what's happening is that Ivory Coast and Guinea, where most of these migrants have come from, have actually started chartering planes to bring them back to their respective countries. But this is what happens with this discourse, because once Britain does it, America does it, it becomes problematic. And there's some statistics that have gone out that says around 80% of Tunisians now believe that racial discrimination is a problem in their country. And this is the highest figure in the so-called Middle East and North Africa region. Racial discrimination. Most Africans don't experience racism if you're on the continent, but now we're seeing this growth in demonizing people who are indigenous to the soil, indigenous to the land. Yuck.
So I've got another comment, Toyin. And this is from Mr. The 4-3. I have to rest up now, but thank you for this. And I especially appreciate what you said about the referendum, because I remember my nan saying vile things about Polish people who never had an issue until then. And then he goes on to say, to my surprise, she voted Remain because of me.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear that positive outcome. And that's the reality with these kind of issues. Well, first of all, I should say, rest up safely, and thank you for being with us on the journey. And you can catch the rest of the program. It should be recorded, so you can see it on YouTube or Facebook. But that's the other thing. Not most, but a lot of racists hold those views quite passionately when they have no interaction with people from different backgrounds than themselves. That's part of the problem. That's how xenophobia works. But the moment you actually interact with people from different backgrounds, when you start talking to that Polish neighbor, when you start talking to that Ghanaian, when you start talking to that Trinidadian, all of a sudden, they're no longer this other monster, this other person scrounging off you. And you start to see if the person has some kind of ethical center, that softening, that change. And so that's the reason why you're seeing the government so harsh on this. They don't want a Britain where it looks like London, where you have this beautiful diversity of people from all over the world in the capital. They do not want that for the rest of the country. And for me, that's one of the best things about the UK, that London is that place where you can meet everyone from all over the world. With all the negativity and the barbarism and the racism and the exploitation, at least you have this potential that you can learn and you can experience and you can visit, and you've got friendship and there's love and all those kind of things there. So I'm on my soapbox again. Thank you for joining us. Okay,
so I've got another one from Kamal Busa. Greetings, brother. Appreciate the updates.
Sorry, I missed that. I spoke over you. My apologies.
Oh, Kamal Busa says, greetings, brother. Appreciate the updates.
Oh, appreciate the updates. Thank you. Give thanks for that. It's good to have you with us as well. It's been a while. Okay, I'll move to the next story. And this one is a bittersweet one for me as well. I mean, it's a good story, but I'm also mindful of it as well. The good aspect of this is that Uganda is actually on its way to becoming a nuclear power, and using nuclear energy to in a way that actually diversifies its energy streams and energy resources. And I think this is an amazing piece of news, because for the longest while, a lot of African problems, when I'm talking about from manufacturing problems, has been because of insufficient power supplies. And even though I'm still an advocate for what Sheikh Abdul proposed, which is the idea of using hydro and solar power, and wind power as clean energy sources, and he proposed that decades ago. And I wished that African leaders had engaged and did the investment for that, because then Africa would have been well ahead of all this talk about responding to the climate emergency. But at least there's thinking on this approach now. Now, this site, this new nuclear power site, will be constructed in collaboration with the Chinese National Nuclear Corporation. I know some people will have that'll be red flags for some people, but it's a difficult one here. I am in favor. I don't actually like nuclear technology. I'll be honest with you about that, but it is cleaner. It does cause less environmental health. It's just the byproducts of uranium are toxic. They're far more toxic. They last for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, that's the biggest issue. So this is actually a good news story in the sense that it will diversify Ugandan's energy resources, and it will hasten its transition to what we call green power. It will become a leader in that way, and other African nations might follow suit. The negative aspect of this is that it's bringing in nuclear technology, which has a toxic byproduct and will place Uganda on the threat list from white supremacists who dislike anyone other than European nations having nuclear technology, because then we'll start seeing things about you're not allowed to enrich uranium and all this kind of nonsense that's going on. I know the headline says the third nuclear powered country. I should just be a bit clear. The other two, just in case you're unaware, is South Africa, or Zania, actually has an active plant. It always has had an active plant, and it was Nelson Mandela that made or did a deal with the European forces at the time on his release to take away nuclear armament and to disarm its nuclear weapons and leave Zania defenseless. He's an ancestor now, so I don't really want to go much on that. It's one of the decisions I did disagree with. And the other African nation is Egypt. Egypt has been developing a nuclear power plant since 2022. So just watch this space. I'm not saying nuclear power is the panacea. It is the answer to our problems. But energy and clean energy is a challenge that we have to deal with. And this is one way to deal with it. I just prefer using thermal, solar, hydro, and other green ways to generate power. Okay, the last section for the program, and I'll try and put a smile on your face and do this as quickly as possible, because I know that we're running a little close to time. I think it's not an hour program now. It's rapidly becoming a half an hour program. That's because I keep putting in extra slides. The next story is one of Dr. Yemisi Bokini, who's launched a sickle cell podcast, and it's a new series just to raise cultural awareness around the project. Now, she was inspired to do this after the unfortunate passing of Evan Nathan Smith, and he was a 21-year-old who passed away from sickle cell in the UK, and largely due to a lack of understanding of the condition. So she's decided that, look, this is ridiculous that in this time now that this is still happening. So Sickle Cell Unboxed is this 5-part podcast series which she's produced with that she's produced and using her medical skills to share information in a manner that's cultural that we can learn from. And it unboxes themes such as the historical origins and early explanations rooted in our traditional folklore, and just contemporizing some of the issues about having sickle cell and lived experience of having it, and forming relationships and sustaining them. So, I just want to commend her for doing that. It's always important that we are at the forefront of solving our own problems. And sometimes that'd be big steps up, like what we see with Black Lives Matter. Sometimes that'd be small steps, like our sister here just launching a podcast. I want to commend her, and well done. Thank you. The next story, we're talking about big examples of people kind of like and organizations helping our community. Well, I think it was the anniversary of Darcus Howe, who's one of the, I don't know if he was the first editor, but he was definitely one of the most influential editors of the Raise Today journal. And the magazine has actually now made a decision to go online. And so it's going to launch its archive for the first time since its final publication in 1988 on the internet to make it accessible to the next generation. So I say next generation, that's us and our children's and their children's now. This is an amazing achievement. This is what needs to happen, and please let's support this as it goes through. Race Today was an amazing publication. I feel really I feel like a baby in many ways, because this was out in the 70s and the 80s, and I wasn't as conscious as I didn't have that same level of awareness as I do now. And so while I was just bumming around playing music and doing gigs and stuff as a musician, programming computers and playing loads of video games, the stalwarts of our community were putting out some amazing, they call it radical journalism, but it wasn't. It was just decent journalism dealing with disgusting issues. And that's why it became radical, because they were just doing what the mainstream should be doing, but on our behalf and through our lens. And it's amazing that they're going online, and we have a lot to learn from them. So yeah, that's a piece of good news.
Okay, Toyin, so we've got 2 comments from D saying thank you and keep up this good work.
Thank you for that. Yes.
And also D says, are you live every week or fortnight?
Every fortnight we try to go live, and then we stop at term times. Like, so when the schools normally have a break, when we tend to have a break at similar times. But yes, every fortnight. So the program is a digest of everything that's happened over the last 2 weeks. Okay, shall I go to the next slide? No, okay, cool. And so, just to wrap up, like I said, there's a couple more slides. I thought this was an amazing story. This is that of 2 survivors of the 1921 massacre of African people in the US city of Tulsa, who have now been granted Ghanaian citizenship. And, I'm a Pan-Africanist, so this is clearly going to touch my heart. Now, many of us are unfamiliar with the story of how over 300 African Americans were murdered in a prosperous town, which was known then as Black Wall Street, and how they were destroyed. I mean, they were murdered, their homes and businesses were razed to the ground by a mob of Euro-Americans. And I put an image underneath the title or the headline of a TV series called The Watchmen. The Watchmen is a comic by Alan Moore. It's a really good comic, but what happens is that there's a film of it, which is actually a good film, but it's not the point of this. There's a TV series of The Watchmen, which is based on the film. And what they did in this TV series is that they remixed it, and they centered the story of Tulsa in it. So it's still like a superhero kind of thing in that way, but it addresses the issue of Tulsa in a way that I thought was amazing. And so if you don't know much about Tulsa, there's many videos you can check out on YouTube, which probably will give you nightmares if I'm going to be really honest with you. But if you want to contextualize it afterwards in a way that kind of gives you hope after you've watched some of them, then take a, I think it's like 6, I can't remember how many episodes, maybe it's 6 or 7. Go and you can watch the Watchmen series. If you like superhero things, this is an amazing story that kind of addresses those issues in a fictional way, but it's based on reality. So I kind of really loved that. Just so you know that the 2 elders, one is called Mrs. Fletcher, and the other one was Mr. Van Ellis, and they visited Ghana in August 2021, and the ceremony which granted them citizenship took place in Washington, D.C. So, people try to say, African people don't unite, we never work together, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. Actually, what happens is that we're one family. And as much as people like to cause division in America, we have toxic groups like ADOS and FBA. And unfortunately, we have people like, the guy who made that Hidden Colors film. I mean, it's really odd because you had Umar, you had Tariq, and they seemed like they were doing positive work, but unfortunately, they went down this so-called FBA is Foundational Black American, and ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, and they are now part of the anti-immigration. They attack Africans who come from the Caribbean and are in America, and Africans who come from the continent who are in America, and that and that's why I say the reparations movement in America is going on a slightly different trajectory. Their argument is that reparations is not from anyone from the Caribbean or anyone from the continent, but only for those who are, who they see as American. They don't even see themselves as African. Thankfully, not everyone's like that, as our elders here show. And thankfully, in the continent and in the Caribbean, as we spoke about Mia Motley, we know that's not the case.
Sorry, we've got 3 comments from our friend Cosmic Jedi. The first one, I love that name, honestly. The first one is, the movie was pretty good.
Yeah, it
was. Then he says some obvious symbology too.
Yeah, symbology, yeah.
And yeah, I thought it was that, yeah. And how about Lovecraft Country as well? That too has some nuggets of information in regards to Tulsa massacre.
Thank you. I haven't actually seen that yet, so I will have to put that on the list. Lovecraft Country,
What's
yeah?
it called? It's called Lovecraft Country.
Honey, can you remind me of that one when we're looking for something? That's
Yeah, I'm gonna have to write it down because boy, I can't remember nothing these days. But yeah, I will definitely.
thank you. Oh, thank you for the tips and thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the last couple of slides. There's a couple of events taking place over the next few weeks. We had International Women's Day a few days ago. It doesn't mean that it's all over. There's a couple of events that you can see. I put the slides up on the screen so you can catch the details, hopefully. The first is one with Professor Nicola Rollock. I think she's talking about the racial code. And there's another one with Carol Boyce Davies, who's looking at the role of African women in leadership positions. And I think it's really important now. Of course, when we talk about African women, we talk about International Women's Day. Often what happens is that African women are excluded from those discussions. They become adornments to the narrative of womanhood, which is seen broadly through a Eurocentric lens. So I think it's really important that we, if we have an opportunity, listen and learn and support sisters who are sharing this alternative view that is actually empowering us in that way. The next event.
Sorry, Toyin. Cosmic Jedi said, "Bro, what?"
Oh, is that about me not having seen Lovecraft? Is it Lovecraft? Yes, Love.
Yeah,
No?
I don't. I'm assuming, yeah, that's what he means.
Okay, no, it's time. I try, but I can't catch everything. It's just so I will do. There's a lot of other things that I've heard of that are good out there that I just haven't had a chance of. There's a Harriet Tubman thing. Is it the Underground Railroad? I don't know if it's any good yet, but it's something I need to watch. And I haven't watched that Emancipation film. Is it Emancipation, the one with Will Smith? I'm a bit suspect because of timing. It might be him trying to get us on side after the fallout of the Oscar thing last year. But I just had to add this to the list. Thank you.
Sorry, he's come back again and said, "You've not seen it? ? Knowing you, fam, you will enjoy that one for sure. It's heavy and rated R, so heads up. Also,
Okay.
some heavy sci-fi and ancestral/spiritual symbiology."
I definitely will look forward to that. From the moment there's that sci-fi element in it, and it's dealing with real world politics as well. Yeah, that's got my name on it. Give thanks. Now, what I'm going to do, I mean, this is just as a reminder that there's an event. Like I said, I do have a little bit of skin in the game with this one. This is the Amplified Voices Conference, which is taking place on the 1st of April this year. It's going to be held at UCL. I am one of the co-hosts, but it's been organized by the amazing Hackney account. It's a conference really for healing, hope, and justice. It's going to be youth-led. And because it's youth-led, I plead with you, if you know any young people, I know it's a Saturday, it's from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., but any young people who kind of traumatized by some of the stuff that they hear about stop and search, and I'm talking about situations like the child queue, and also just basic day-to-day disgusting interactions that happen on their way to school, on their way home, which just dehumanizes them. Well, Hackney account has been for a long while, and I am biased. I'm not pretending that it's based in Hackney. I think the group's amazing. They also scrutinize the police data, but they also believe that part of their work is about building hope. It is about healing. It is about focusing on justice. And so this conference will be led by young people. We're expecting there to be some people from the institutions involved there present so they can listen to the voice of young people. You can find it on Eventbrite, the link to register to come up. But please, if you can make it, try and do so. We have to support our young people when they are doing this kind of work. I cannot stress that enough. And if you can't make it, send it to someone else who can. So I don't know if you're on those what is it, WhatsApp or TikTok or whatever these kind of things, but if you can go to the Hackney account Twitter page, you can download the flyer and just share the poster, with your community groups, with the people that you work with. I very much appreciate that. I want this to go well for them, and I've opened and unlocked the doors at University College London, so it'll be hosted there. So yeah, that's Amplified Voices, the 1st of April, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. and healing, hope, and justice. And in line with all the stuff we've been talking about with immigration and toxic laws and parliamentary banditry and mischief, one of the things that we probably will forget, because UK is no longer within the EU, the political EU, is that next week is Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. And so Britain has an excuse not to celebrate it, not to talk about it, not to organise. The same way it does nothing about IDPAD, about recognising it's the International Day or International Decade for people of African descent. They can pretend that it's not an Anti-Racism and Diversity Week. I think it was actually Anti-Racism Day yesterday or today. We don't hear anything about that unless you're very lucky. But we need to remember that this is something that's taking place. I'm going to try and get to Brussels if I can and go to Parliament, European Parliament, and join with other amazing people who are doing work to eradicate Afrophobia and other forms of racism across Europe. But if you can do anything, if you're at a school or if in your workplace and they're looking for something to do next week, something laudable, just remind them that we haven't dealt with racism yet. It's not finished yet. So I thought I'd share that date with you.
Sorry, Toyin, one last thing. Dee says, thanks, Cosmic Jedi. I will look into Lovecraft Country.
Yes, okay. Thanks. That's good. You're sharing information across each other. I love it. And the last thing I want to say is, today we opened up with the passing of Wayne Shorter. And he was an amazing musician, amazing. But in 2016, him and Herbie Hancock, another amazing musician and innovator, always taking risks. If you're a hip hop head, you probably know him from Rocket. If you're a jazz head, then you know him from way, way, way back. But they together wrote this open letter to the next generation of artists in 2016, and I only saw this this week, as a result of the amazing work of the researchers who provide the stories for this program. And I was reading it, and it just touched me in such a deep way. And I think, even though this was written like some 7 years ago, the words are still relevant. So I'd say, if you get a chance, just type that into Google and open that to the next generation of artists, and read it. There's a couple of themes I'll mention, and I'll give you the bullet points that they have, and I've written in front of me, and they're really good kind of mantras to live by. The first that they have is awaken to your humanity. I'm not going to editorialize each one, so it's awaken to your humanity. They next say, embrace and conquer the road less traveled. Welcome the unknown. And then they say, understand the true nature of obstacles. And in this one, which I think we just don't do enough of, is don't be afraid to interact with those who are different from you. They next say, strive to create a gender-free dialogue. This one, which many people struggle with, but it's so key. Be wary of ego. And then they say, appreciate the generation that walked before you. And when they close with, lastly, we hope that you live in a state of constant wonder. Now, those are just the headlines of their open letter. Each those statements, those mantras, are followed by a little bit of wisdom from our beloved Herbie Hancock, who's still with us, and our now ancestor Wayne Shorter. They have left a legacy that will live eternally. But this letter is something to just to hear something that goes beyond the music. If you have a chance, please check it out. So I'm going to close on that note. I don't think there's anything else for me to say. I want to thank you for bearing with us. As ever, I want to thank our researchers. I want to thank our supporters who continue to donate to the program. I want to thank you, our community, for listening and sharing and caring enough. We will be back on the 26th of March. And wow, Sister Oleander, I don't know if you want to say anything before.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the interaction in the comments box today. That was really good. Learned something. Got a new film to watch. Yeah, it was just really, I really enjoyed the program. I mean, I enjoy all of them, but this one particularly had a lot to say, so that was great. And yeah, I just want to say, everybody, guidance and protection.
Definitely. And as our close say, be careful, be safe, watch over yourself and loved ones. These are perilous times. More than anything, let's make sure and ensure that the ancestors continue to watch, guide, and protect us. Ashe.